What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we go over the Magic stories as they're posted on Wizard's website. But since there's no stories till next week, we are here for part 2 of our top 10 Magic stories of 2017.
Yay.
If you missed part 1, I'll try to link it at the top so you guys can go check it out. That was where we did numbers 10 through 6, and we did an honorable mention for the bottom one. As promised this week, we are going to have numbers 5 through 1, but we're also going to be starting with our bottom one, our only bottom one story of the year. Last year we did bottom 3, whatever. This year we picked 1, and we will start with that. But first of all, for you new viewers, returning viewers, whichever, Happy New Year to you all, 2018. Like I said, next week we start with the Rivals of Ixalan stories. We're really excited for them. Stay tuned for that. But for now, like we said, we are here for the top 10, and we are at, like I said, numbers 5 through 1. But first, let's start on a little bit on the negative side as we talk about something that we didn't like as much. It happens. We review these stories, and they'll pop up at the top or at the end for you guys to check out later on if you want to go watch those reviews if you don't remember them. But we're going to start with our bottom story of the year, and it is from Ixalan. It is Jace Alone by the R&D Narrative team. This story, if you watched our show, you know we weren't fans of it. I didn't. There were a lot of people who told us that they believed that there were continuity issues with the story.
Yeah.
We believed there were continuity issues with the story. We believed that it didn't make any sense. It
was also so long and drawn out and boring,
and this was our introduction to Ixalan. This was the first Ixalan story. It was the first story of the broken up Gatewatch. It was the first story, main set story following Hour of Devastation, where Nicol Bolas defeated and scattered the Gatewatch to all corners of the multiverse.
and it was also the story that led us into realizing that Jace was basically going to be a new person now. And that kind of stinks because I really liked the new Jace, and I feel like this story didn't make me excited. And maybe if it had, I would have liked the new Jace that much more. But, now we have the old Jace back, so I guess it's not as bad.
Not yet we don't, but we know that we will be getting it because Ixalan, or Rivals of Ixalan, has been spoiled so far, and so we have seen story spotlight cards. We've seen some of the things from the Ixalan art book that talk about these types of things, so we do know that those things are coming up soon.
Right.
But, like I said, I'm still looking forward to those stories. It's not, we're reserving judgment for now. But, back to this exact story, we're still talking about Jace Alone, and I mean, my biggest problem with the story to begin with was they were talking about Jace's amnesia, and they were talking about him having problems remembering anything about himself. He didn't remember his name, he didn't remember his planeswalker powers, he didn't know what planeswalking was.
Yeah.
And yet, he knew what animals were, like he knew what a fish was, he knew how to fish, he knew how to build a raft.
Yeah, he just, magically had skills that damn well he wouldn't have had. Based on what his life used to be, there's no way that he would have been this resourceful.
And the story tried to stretch the timeline out over months so that you were aware, hey, this took a long time. Right. But from some readers' perspectives, it went from Jace first getting there to, oh my god, he's jacked because he's been doing only manual labor, trekking around these islands or these land masses, accumulating strength by, moving things, building things, lifting things, and again, building his raft and etc. And then sailing. That he just knew how to sail? I don't know how to sail, but I know my own damn name. So there was a huge discrepancy there between what he could remember and what he couldn't. There was no period of time that made sense for what he did remember versus what he didn't. Like, there was no, like, slash of, like, well, he learned all these things before this time, and so it was only, you know, this set period of time that he didn't. There was nothing there. And I don't need an exact bright line of, wow, I remember June 25th and before, but nothing after. Like, I don't need that, but he doesn't remember his name or his powers, but he remembers how to sail a boat or a raft and build one. Those types of things made no sense. It was, and I think on top of the fact that it was the first story of the set of the block, that's a bad way to introduce readers to it, because that's the kind of thing that it would be nice to get new readers in to start reading, because it's like, this is a whole new Jace, right? He has amnesia, so you don't have to worry about knowing about the past necessarily.
Right.
This is just a story. And anybody coming in from the outside reading that story would just be like, I have no idea what's going on.
He's like, they would just be like, okay, well, not reading another one of these.
Right.
Because what a waste of time that was.
Right. And so, for that reason, among many others, that is our worst, in our opinion, the bottom one. I don't want to say worst. The bottom one story of the year 2017. If you guys have opinions on this and or our top 5, please, as always, leave them in the comments. You can talk to us on Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Right. Let us know if we got it wrong. Let us know if you liked our comments.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
add your own.
On to positive, happy things. We are off of the bottom one, and we are into the top 5. I'm super excited to share this list with you guys. I really hope you agree, even somewhat, and or we can have a discussion about it, because that's what this show is all about. So, number 5, we go back to Amonkhet. We were on Ixalan, now we're back on Amonkhet for the Amonkhet stories, and we have Brazen by Michael Yichow. And Brazen was awesome. Brazen was the type of story that I really enjoy, because it's going through the trial, right? It's going through Bantu's trial, so you get to see the different trial rooms and the puzzles and things like that. I'm a D&D guy. I enjoy seeing puzzles getting completed, or a video game guy
Going through
even.
each room, you know, to its next, you know, trials and tribulations.
Yes, and seeing what challenge or what puzzle is presented to them, and kind of seeing the interesting ways in which that group, that crop, along with Gideon, accomplished those tasks. And so that...
Well, you could feel like that if it wasn't so deadly.
Right, and we'll that's where it's kind of leading to, is that, you know, that kind of a story I've always enjoyed. This puts such an interesting twist on it, where you start this story with the crop, and Gideon meeting the crop, and you get to see the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the sisterhood among these people and these crop mates.
Talking about their strengths and their weaknesses.
And their trials and tribulations of past trials that this crop has gotten through. And you get to meet all these characters, and sure, you can't flesh them all out. But, of course, JaAR is a big one that you meet at this point, and you get to learn about him and his likes and dislikes and his relationships with among his crop. Mm-hmm. And then they put them into the trial itself. And in the trial itself, everything goes to hell almost immediately. And those of us reading it...
expression, but devastation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we weren't there yet, but right. Yes, exactly. And you get to see, you know, we are looking at this from Gideon's perspective, and that's good, because we, like Gideon, are outsiders to this world of, sure, this is totally how it is. And all of these crop mates are just like, yeah, whatever.
Right, so his perspective was similar to our own.
Yes. And that's good. He was being used as kind of the catalyst for our expectations and our understanding, or lack thereof.
And our living through these different aspects of the story.
Right, because we got to see, if you're not familiar with the story, we got to see these crop mates going through this trial and just dropping like flies. And for those that survived...
And being okay with it.
Well, I was just going to say, in each room, more and more people... I think there might have been one room where no one died, but, you know, whether they got mauled or crushed or left behind... people just die. I mean, like fodder, absolute fodder, just dying and dying and dying. And their crop mates, their friends, their comrades, we were just talking about that they spent all of this time showing you the brotherhood, the sisterhood. They're all just dying, and all of their friends are just like, okay, on to the next room. You know, it happens, and glory to them because they're now going to be chosen, right? They're going to become the mummies, and it's like, excuse me, for us looking at it, it's like, what are they doing?
Dude, what is wrong with you? That's okay.
Yeah, it's so crass. And Gideon is kind of seeing more and more, and he wants to be the hero. He wants to go in and save them. And Jeru and the other crop mates have to say to him, no, forget it, they're dead, move on.
Right.
Or, you know, just pulling him along and saying, no, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
And then you get to the final room. And the final room contains Bantu herself, the god, the crocodile-headed god. And all these crop mates are so happy to finally see one of their gods.
Right.
And Gideon, this is what Gideon wanted. Gideon has that positive opinion of the gods following his meeting of Oketra.
Right.
And now he's in this room with Bantu. And Bantu says, great, you've all made it. But only half of you can cross. So figure it out, because you need a heart to do it. And so now all of these crop mates, if I remember correctly, one twin kills the other. And these crop mates friends just kill each other and use the heart of their friend to complete the trial. And to them, once again, totally normal, totally makes sense. And then you have Gideon.
It's not normal, it's glorious.
Right. They want that to happen. They are happy that it is happening.
It's worse than normal.
Yes. And it's faith, right? We had that discussion in all of our read-throughs of the story, all the different stories in Amun
And that would be fine if we didn't then ultimately learn that it was for nothing.
Right.
Or for evil, really.
Right. Yeah, which of course they didn't know, but we knew going in, because they're all like, oh, in the holy name of the God Pharaoh, and we're like, you guys don't know who the God Pharaoh is, but
we know it's this big evil guy.
Yeah, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. But yes, so for them, and that's kind of why it was such a thing later on when Jeru had to go back on those beliefs to kind of realize that the gods were bad, at least at that time. Nicol Bolas, the God Pharaoh, was bad the whole time.
Right.
And because they were such strongly held beliefs that he was willing to kill his friends and watch his friends die just to complete that trial.
Right.
Or those trials. And he did it so happily and flippantly.
And it's so much less painful to live out your life under that delusion than to find out the truth and have to live with that much guilt.
Oh, yeah. But thankfully he had Semut, and we talked, spoilers, we talked about that one of those stories last week in our 10 through 6. So if you haven't, you can go back and watch that and hear our opinions on that. But, and then the climax of this story, and then we'll move on. The climax of this story was Gideon confronting Bantu. Because again, Gideon was so in the corner of Oketra, so 180'd from dealing with the gods on Theros, where he grew up, to now being on Amonkhet and feeling that warmth and that safety around Oketra. And now he's coming across Bantu, who is, again, so happy and flippant in her willingness to have these people die in her name or in Nicol Bolas's name. Now, we come to find out later that Bantu was the only one of the 5 that wasn't basically being brainwashed into thinking that that made sense. She was doing that of her own free will. And even, I mean, looking back, that just makes it that much better, because you get to see Gideon, a true hero, right? A heroic person confronting this terrible god, right? I mean, godlike powers, confronting her and saying to her, this is wrong, why are you okay with this? And struggling within himself and within his own faith while watching all of these other people who were so sure of theirs.
Well, I mean, it also kind of goes back to, you mentioned Oketra and his feelings around Oketra. When he first met Oketra, what she said to him was, "You're one of mine." Meaning that he's a soldier. And the comfort that he felt around her kind of comes from this need for safety that was the same among them all, because they were all soldiers.
Right.
And they all needed to feel that safety, that lack of fear when going into battle, basically.
Yes.
And so it didn't matter what plane he was from, or, it really doesn't, it's transcendent.
Those ideals are universal. And solidarity was what she preached the most. And, I mean, sure, Gideon and Oketra were both white-aligned planeswalkers as well, characters, planeswalker and god. So that in and of itself, just from a mechanical perspective, we understand that their ideals are interconnected, but
I'm not even talking about ideals. I'm talking about how he felt around her.
Right.
Being the same as what everyone else felt around her, except for the other members of the Gatewatch, because they are not soldiers. And everyone in that plane basically was.
Right, which is why Gideon is the one who took some of the trials.
Right.
And not the other four.
Right, and he felt very betrayed at that point.
Oh yeah.
With Bantu, because he realized that safety was pointless. Yeah.
A sham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feeling he got from Oketra was basically lulling him into a false sense of security so that he would do this and wind up dead and wind up killing other people too. I mean, and maybe that wasn't Oketra's aim necessarily in that, but
I get it. Aim, because she had the bow and arrow.
Okay. But he's just, he in that moment was very betrayed. And so were the people, because, they were literally throwing their lives away.
Right.
For nothing.
For what he knew to be a foolish and incorrect belief.
Right.
But of course they didn't know that. That's how faith works. Right. So for all of those reasons, for that powerful of a story, that is why Brazen by Michael Yi Chow is our number 5 story of 2017. Moving on to number 4, we actually, and I'm as surprised as you are, because I was not a fan of the Ixalan stories in total, but, our bottom one being an example, but we go back to Ixalan for number 4, which is Something Else Entirely, which, as all the Ixalan stories have been, has been attributed to the R&D narrative team. Something Else Entirely was great. Now, in JaAR, when we reviewed it originally, we just watched it back to remind ourselves, I literally said that I thought that it was better than all of the Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation stories. All of them. That's what I said. There's still 2 more to go. Let's see if I was right or not. But Something Else Entirely was amazing. And it, ironically, and or exactly what they meant it to be, Something Else Entirely as a story was, in fact, something else entirely from what we had read so far from Ixalan. This story was amazing, whereas the other ones were lackluster at best. Shapers was okay, right? Shapers was an improvement on Jace alone and Watley's story. But Something Else Entirely ramped it up insanely high. And it showed Jace and Vraska. Amy talked about liking the new Jace. And you get to see Jace interacting with Vraska. Now, Vraska knows who he was. Jace doesn't know who he was, nor does he know who Vraska was. But Vraska knows. And Vraska kind of goes through that transformation in front of him of not trusting him, not wanting him anywhere near her, not wanting him anywhere near the crew.
People in general.
Yes,
really.
yes. And we see that moment of, Jace pats her on the back or taps her shoulder or something, and she freaks out. Don't ever touch me. And she yells and she clenches her fists, and the other pirates step in to protect her because they are her crew.
Right.
And Jace is so apologetic. He's like, I'm so sorry, I had no idea.
Right, because he didn't mean to do anything abusive to her.
Right.
She just had an abusive past where being touched led to that, usually.
And this is the story that explored that further and did it in such a respectful way. And it feels weird to say that they handled it in a respectful way because she herself is a fictional character, but it's respectful because it handled that type of a story in that way, which is good because there are people who go through those types of things. And it was a tough discussion when we had it then, and I guess trigger warning for those of you that might be sensitive, we will be talking about this at least a little bit. It is what made the story as good as it is. So kind of to talk about it, we're going to have, or to review it, we're going to have to talk about that a little bit. So a little bit of a warning for you if you need some time on that, we totally understand. But
and if you go back and watch the original review of that story, definitely a trigger warning.
yeah, and we do the same thing. We warn you the same way there as well because we're not here to upset anyone, and neither was the Wizards, the R&D narrative team, because as we said then, and we'll say it now, they did such an amazing job. It was so true to life in so many different ways. The fact that Vraska, it took her a while to get comfortable enough with new Jace, with Amnesia Jace, to feel comfortable telling him about herself, telling him about her past and her abuse, right? The things that had happened to her that were so traumatic that she was kind of locking them away from herself thinking about them anymore.
Right. Especially knowing that he, before the amnesia, had been someone of influence in that same area.
Yes.
As where she had to go through that kind of thing.
Right. And as well, an enemy to her in her adult life. And so why would you want to share the most vulnerable part of yourself with someone who is nothing, at the time, who you thought to be nothing but your enemy?
Right.
And it took her a long time to get there. And, you can make the comments or the jokes all you want of, I ship Jace and Vraska because they're kind to one another. That's fine. Whether you want to say that they are romantically involved or whether you want to say that they are just very close friends because of sharing that experience, that's fine. But all jokes aside, that was very powerful. That moment was very powerful. And I think my favorite part of that whole story and my favorite part of the Ixalan block of or set of stories was Jace, after Vraska informing him of what she had been through, Jace saying to her, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Right.
Because that's the most true, I think, of anything, because as if you have ever been someone who has been on the receiving end of hearing a story like that, if you've ever struggled to know what to say, maybe that person didn't expect you to say anything, but if you're the type of person that wants to be able to say something, in my opinion, that's one of the best. Because you can't say, it'll be okay.
Right. You can't say anything that will fix it.
You can't say...
Because there is nothing that will fix it.
Right. You can't say, it'll be okay. You can't say, you'll be okay. You can't say, that must have been hard for you, or I know that that must have been hard, because you don't know. You can't tell them. And so it's a struggle sometimes for an ally, if you will, someone that has that information shared with them to know what to do or say, and just thanking them for sharing that with you was one of the most powerful things I've read in quite some time. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you didn't see it that way. And as always, we want to hear your opinions, but that's why this story was so powerful to us, so important to us. I don't know.
That's not why. Not to me.
Okay, fair enough. Go on. I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, it was important to me for the opposite reason, because it was important to hear that all he would say was that, instead of trying to, I don't want to say like make promises he can't keep, but like,
well, but trying to fix it or trying to make it okay is a very old Jace thing to do.
okay. And I didn't necessarily know that.
Well, just in general, I mean, he's the guy with all the answers.
Right.
He always has been, and he always wants to be. And in this instance, there is no answer. You just thank her for sharing it, and
you just be there for her.
I was just going to say those exact words.
And
yes.
listen.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. You are a sounding board. You are a friend. You are a shoulder to cry on. Your eyes to look at, ears to listen, and that's it. And this story, I mean, there was so much more to that story, right? Because it had to lead up to her being comfortable enough to do that. But because what we have been talking about for the past however many minutes
Right.
was the climax of that story, was the ending of that story, that is what made it as powerful as it was. Now, I will acknowledge that I was a little upset that a story or two after that, Jace, the fact that we had repeated to us that she told him that and that he thanked her for it was disappointing.
Yes.
And upsetting, because it was so powerful, and then you just dilute it by doing it again and again and again. And that's why I didn't really like the Ixalan stories, because it was a lot of repetition.
Right. Unnecessary repetition.
Yes.
And I understand a little bit of repetition. You know, we referenced that with quite a few of the stories, saying like, okay, they reiterated this one thing, and either it was super annoying or it was okay because we understood that needed to occur.
Right, it was a nice reminder.
This repetition was certainly not good.
Because it was literally the next week or 2 weeks after. There was no need for it.
It was both.
Yeah.
It was the next week, and then the week after, and then I feel like another week upon that. It was just ridiculous.
Right, and that may be just because we were so annoyed by it,
Yeah.
but still. So, all of that aside, the story in and of itself was so powerful, and at the time that we read it, before knowing that there was repetition about it,
Right.
it was phenomenal. It still holds
incredible.
up as very, very good, and all of those reasons are why it is our number 4.
Yes, definitely. If that's a story you haven't read, go back and read it. Go back and watch our old review of it, because definitely what we're saying here is a lot. It's diluted compared to what we said in the original review.
Yes. So, on to number 3 then, because that's next. We go backwards in time again, back past Ixalan, past Amonkhet, to Aether Revolt. And in Aether Revolt, our number 3 story is Renewal by the Magic Creative Team. Now, that's not the R&D narrative team that we just talked about, that's the Magic Creative Team, and that's because there were different sections to this story, and those sections individually were attributed to Alison Lures, Kelly Diggs, Doug Beyer, Mel Lee, and Chris Latois.
And hearing those names again makes me so happy.
Yes.
Because most of those people, as far as I know, still aren't on the team.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing.
Yes.
Because these writers are incredible. and it's proof. You know, it's in black and white online. You know, you can read these stories and say, wow, those were amazing authors. And for the more recent stories, you can't necessarily do that.
And there's a lot to unpack with this story, so I don't want to go too in-depth because, as always, go watch our review, go read the story. But this was a long story.
Definitely with all of these that are coming up, if you haven't read these stories already, you shouldn't be watching this video. You should go and read those stories first so that you know, one, what the heck we're talking about, and two, you can at least have your own ideas, opinions, and whatever else on those stories without us kind of influencing that by what we have to say.
Well, not only influencing, but don't let us spoil the story for you because it's good enough to be on our top 10 of the year.
Right.
And so you should go read it because it was good and you should, enjoy it the way it was intended to be enjoyed.
Right.
But anyway, so all of those writers, right, did it. It was a long story. It was the finale of Aether Revolt. It was the finale of the Kaladesh block of stories, so it made sense that it was a long one. Yeah. But it was a very long one, split up into those different sections.
But it was not one that felt long. There were plenty of stories in the past, not this past year, but just in the past in general, that we have read where we sat there for JaAR and said, oh, God, this story was so long.
For example,
this is not one of those.
No, and if we're comparing them, we had an issue with The Promised End, which was the finale to Eldritch Moon / the Return or Shadows over Innistrad block of stories.
Right.
And this was the block ending story that followed it, basically, and they fixed so many of the problems, if not all of them.
Yes.
They fixed so many of the issues that we had with those stories, with that story, I should say. They split it up into sections. They were told from different perspectives, and it touched on everything that needed to be touched on. And what we said in our original...
The loose ends actually got tied off.
And what we said in our original review, and I'll say it again, the story ramped up. There were 5 different sections, and each section was better than the one before it, possibly more emotional than the one before it, and there were reasons for that. But you knew, even if you didn't know that it was the final story, you knew it was the final story.
Yeah, it had that vibe.
Yes. It didn't have to say, the last of it doesn't matter. You knew from reading the stories. And
there was a lot of finality to it.
Yes. And stuff that has had far-reaching implications, some of which we haven't even seen the end of yet. So we had, I wrote quick little things here. We were in the Dund prison in the beginning with Chandra and Pia. They were seeing Baral. Baral was still super smug, but Chandra was there with her mom and she was about to get fired up, and then Pia kind of calmed her down, but also shut Baral up and made sure to tell him that he was going to rot in that prison. You find out about the government and how the government was going to be changing. And for me, that's something I wouldn't normally care about. But in a set of stories where that was the main form of conflict, was the government coming down on the people and the people revolting and revolutionizing and getting themselves back into it, to then see what happened to that government, to see Tezzeret gone, Dovin Baan gone, a lot of the evil consulate gone, and to see Pia as the main renegade, the most wanted woman on Kaladesh, if you will, being one of the people to step up and fill those vacancies, was great and done in such a nice way. Then you move on back to the Gatewatch proper. I mean, we were just with Chandra, but you move on to the entirety of the Gatewatch, and you get a Johnny's Oath. Now, in The Promised End, like we talked about, they did Liliana's Oath, and they rushed through it, and it sucked. It wasn't given the right amount of time. In this one, they did a Johnny's Oath, and they did it amazingly well. Did they do word for word the description to a Johnny of what they were and what they were trying to fight for? They didn't have to. They did it in a very clever way. Go watch our review, go read the story. But it was so nicely done. It was 100% an improvement from Liliana's. and then Ajani was in the group. And then you have the discussion with Ajani, or the discussion that Ajani had with the Gatewatch of, don't go to Amonkhet, don't go after Nicol Bolas. And the Gatewatch kind of says okay, he leaves, and then they just tactically decide that they're gonna go anyway. And that they had their reasons, but they weren't necessarily the best ones, and they thought that they could beat Nicol Bolas, and they left. And we all know how that turned out now, but at the time we didn't. But still, I mean, Ajani warned them. He really tried, and here we are, right? Now the Gatewatch is scattered, and whether that was a narrative tool or not, that was only the second part of the 5. Then we move on to the part that I'm going to probably just let Amy take over for. We have Yahenni's penultimate party.
Something that was anticipated, something that was also at the same time something to dread, because a character that I personally fell so in love with, but I think a lot of people did.
Agreed.
Their life was about to end, you know. So it was definitely something I was looking forward to, because I wanted to know how it was going to go, and Yahenni was looking forward to it.
Yes. As most Aetherborn tend to.
Right, because it was a party, and it was a big deal, and it was, you know, the culmination of all of the sort of wonderful times that Yahenni got to experience in their life.
Yes.
And so, you know, it was definitely something I was looking forward to, but it was also something that I was dreading, because I was like, okay, well, we're going to go into this story. I'm going to be excited for it, but should I be? Because by the time it's over, Yahenni is over. And, you know, does that mean that we're even really going to get any more cool Aetherborn characters to fall in love with? And, you know, and I did say in our JaAR video that, you know, it was a character that, even though their life ended in that story, you know, it's Yahenni is one of my favorite characters, and I hoped that they would remain one of my favorite characters. And I'm kind of sorry I said that, because I feel like that's going to be the case. I'm going to love Yahenni, and I'm not going to have as much of a connection with a lot of the newer characters, or I so far have not. So, right. You know, I'll say in this video that I hope to have another love affair with another character in even close to a similar way.
Yeah. And it was we said it all in that review, and you should go watch it. It was a long one, warning, I guess.
Yes.
But it was totally worth it. And shout out to Alison Lures for having poured her heart and soul into the creation of Yahenni.
Yes.
And into kind of Yahenni's rise, and I don't want to say fall because that implies something different, but the beginning and end of Yahenni's story being able to come full circle, come to a logical and amazing conclusion, and be done in such an awesome way.
Right.
In a block that had a lot of other things going on.
Right.
Right? You still had Pia and Chandra and Baral and Dovin Bond and Tezzeret and the other members of the Gatewatch.
Felt like distractions from the other.
Yep.
They all felt that they should have their own time. They were all given their own time, and none of them felt out of place and wrong. They even when it didn't flow, because it wasn't given the chance to flow, it was segmented. Those segments worked. Those segments made sense. And it allowed the story as a whole to actually be cumulatively a great story.
Yeah. And with this being the third section, the middle section of the story, it combined with the final section showed Etherborn, Yeheni mainly, but Etherborn in general interacting with Nissa. I gave it away. But anyway, one of Amy's other favorite characters, Nissa. And Yeheni kind of was flirting with her a little bit, but also just being friendly with her and kind of getting her out of her shell. And kind of foreshadowing, we didn't know it at the time at all, but once we knew it and we were directed back to it, once again, shout out to Allison Lures, once we were kind of directed back to it, we got to see that Yeheni was dropping hints in their recognition of Nissa. And again, bringing Nissa out of her shell meant that she was gaining a new attribute. She was becoming different and growing as a character. And then the next time we see her on Amonkhet, she's part blue. And that's really important. And there were a lot of aspects to Nissa that showed that she deserved to be blue, both at the end in this story, as well as into Amonkhet. Maybe we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
anyway,
I was gonna say, we'll get to how amazing Nissa is.
Yes. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about with this story was also just Pia and Chandra's goodbye. Because Pia can't planeswalk with Chandra. Chandra has to leave now as a member of the Gatewatch, and we knew then that she was going after Nicol Bolas with the rest of the Gatewatch. And you talk about ramping it up, right? Yeheni dying was super emotional. Now you get to Chandra and her mother saying goodbye. Super emotional.
Right.
At the end.
And super emotional, not just for the two of them as characters, but also for the audience. Because realizing that Pia Nalar was even still alive was a big, it was a big deal for the readers.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Because
Agreed.
a lot of them were around, from kind of the inception of Chandra, and I really wasn't. So I didn't know Pia before now, basically, before that.
Right, I mean, yeah.
But she was near and dear to the fans long before that point. And so bringing her back and realizing she wasn't dead was, a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah. And then to have this part of the story where Pia is taking up that motherly role that she never really got to take with Chandra.
Right.
But because she was Renegade Prime, she was the leader of the revolutionaries, we had seen in the stories that she was a mother figure to many others to begin with. Mm-hmm. Young, up-and-coming inventors who may not have had someone to look over their work and encourage them. Mm-hmm. We saw her do that in prior stories, and in this one, Pia says a very motherly thing. You're gonna say goodbye to me this time. I'm not gonna lose you again because you're afraid to say goodbye or you're afraid that you're gonna be sad. Say goodbye to me. We will see each other soon. And, we knew that Chandra was going off to face Nicol Bolas, but, we hoped she wouldn't die in the process, but whatever. Pia was saying to Chandra, you will say goodbye. This will not be forever. And I mentioned it in our review. I told you we looked over these to remind ourselves, and I loved this. Pia said to her, you will say it 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, until it becomes not a problem for you to say it. That's so cool. I mean, you talk about powerful from before. How awesome is that?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she was alive kind of gave us back that tragedy of her death. But the other tragedy is that she didn't get to really be a mom for Chandra like she should have been able to be.
Right.
Because she's obviously incredible at it.
Oh, yeah.
She's a great mom, and that's evident. And so that's the other thing that sucks about the fact that she didn't really get to have that.
Right. And so that was, combined with everything else, right? Just a really awesome...
As if you needed any other reason to love this story.
Right. Awesome part of the story, and that is why this story, Renewal from Aether Revolt, was our number 3. Now we are on to number 2. it's almost like we just talked about Nissa, didn't
Yes.
we? And how she was part blue. So what story could we possibly go to for our number 2? Oh, right. It's going to Amonkhet. It is The Hand That Moves by Ken Troop. This story...
Wonderful, 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 wonderful.
Again, Amy enjoys Nissa, but I also can't say that it's her bias that makes her think that this deserves to be number 2 on our list. This story was great.
It's incredible.
And the story was a very good description of, or showing of why Nissa, or showing off Nissa's blue part, if you will. She's in Kefnet's monument. She's in Kefnet's room or world, and Kefnet is messing with her mind. Kefnet is putting her through Kefnet's trial, the trial of knowledge, and one that prior to her experiences on Kaladesh, where she originally showed up on the plane and she was like, oh, this is another industrial plane. I don't really like it here. There's not really a lot of nature. And then taking the time through meeting Yeheni and being on the plane long enough, she got to meet the plane. Right. She got to meet the ether, embodied in Etherborn, and becoming friends with the plane's energy, similar to how she did on Zendikar.
Right. Regardless of how different it was from Zendikar, realizing that it wasn't, it wasn't going to be as near and dear to her as Zendikar would, but it wasn't the opposite of Zendikar. It wasn't this lifeless, useless plane. It was actually this very vibrant, very ether-enriched world,
Yeah, and I mean, she did a lot of work on Amonkhet, and specifically in Kefnet's temple. She thought she was going to die. Yeah. She thought her mind was going to be shredded to pieces. Mm-hmm. And while she was going through there, Ken Troop does an amazing job. We talked about it then. I'll briefly touch on it now. Of putting, and this has been the case, but specifically female characters, but has done a good job of putting characters through these scenarios, these otherworldly, outside of the realm of understanding scenarios in every block. And this was the one for this block, and it was so well done. And it showed you Nissa's power, it showed you her potential. If you didn't already know it, because, Amy's been saying that for years. Yeah.
But also, it kind of gave you another perspective on Emrakul. Except, at least for me it did.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I loved Emrakul from forever, but, most people thought of Emrakul as being this sort of mindless, evil creature. And we really got to, the precipice in this story of, seeing how vast and amazing and wise she really was.
Oh, yeah. And the chess analogies with Emrakul were insane. I mean, we talked about Promised End earlier, right? That's fine. The story exists and it's canon, whether we liked it or not. And there was the chess match between Jace and Emrakul that went on. And then in this story, the story is called The Hand That Moves, and Emrakul says to Nissa, don't be the pawn, don't be the knight, the rook, the queen, the king, be the hand. Pieces. Yes, be the hand that moves those pieces. That is amazing. What an awesome analogy. And combined with the fact that...
And who else, other than Emrakul, could really ever say that?
And combined with the fact that the Eldrazi have been described as... the Eldrazi's presence on Zendikar had been described as a hand inside of a pond, inside of a body of water, implying that that is not all of the Eldrazi that you are seeing. That is merely the hand of the body, and it is still that powerful.
Right.
So Emrakul is fully aware of being the hand that moves the pieces as opposed to the pieces themselves, but a part of the whole being that is that much larger than everything else.
Right, and stepping aside from thinking evil versus good, just realizing that a creature of that much vast, amazing power would actually speak to Nissa like that, would actually say to her, like, no, you're thinking about it all wrong. Like, this is what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, oh, well, you know, instead of treating her as if she is a pawn.
Right. And then,
You know, kind of giving her the choice to make the decision to not be the pawn.
right. And then you have the climax of the story with Nissa basically almost, like we said earlier, almost meeting her end at the mind of Kefnet, and then thinking outside the box and realizing that gods are just pure ether or mana, ley lines like anything else.
Right.
And since she can manipulate ley lines, she went in and manipulated a god. Sure, it was a strain, but she would have been dead otherwise.
Right.
So she went in and basically just pulled on a thread, and Kefnet let her go and said, okay, you can leave now. Congrats, you completed the trial.
Yet another story where we learn of Nissa's evolution, because way back in the day, as you said, you know, she saw ley lines, they existed,
Excuse me.
she could manipulate the ley lines.
Yes.
And then it was like each new plane that she went to, those ley lines sort of manifest in a different way. And she kind of had to adapt to each new plane and figure out how she could kind of be the hand that moves.
Mm-hmm.
The power that she could wield on each of these planes.
Oh, yeah.
In their own way. Because it wasn't the same plane to plane.
Right.
And that goes back to what we were talking about for the other story, where we were saying, you know, she had to learn that the plane of Kaladesh had the same things that Zendikar had, in terms of giving her the power that she, you know, the mana still existed. It was just different.
Right.
And she
It
just
was in the
needed
sky
to,
instead
right,
of in
and
the
she
ground
just
or
needed
whatever.
to learn how she could use that. And it was cool that we got to see her make that transition and do that and become part blue. I mean, it's really cool. And then in this story, it just went that much further, because it really just, you know, kind of took her perspective, you know, her sort of tunnel vision of the multiverse,
Mm-hmm.
and completely flipped it on its head and really made her see that her power is much more vast than she realizes, and the multiverse is much more vast than she realizes.
Yeah, and right, and she'll hopefully know now in the future how all of that works in terms of needing to get to know the place first and etc. If she hasn't been there before.
Right, and I kind of made it
Gain
seem,
that knowledge, if you will.
yeah, and I kind of made it seem like Emrakul was almost like her mentor in this, but I think mentor and pupil or adversaries. Either way, like, we know as the audience that we're going to end up getting back to a point where they're going to have to refight Emrakul.
Most likely. Oh yeah.
So-
almost definitely.
So we're getting to see the Gatewatch climb the ladder ever closer to becoming an actual match for Emrakul.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool.
Yeah, they've got
That's really cool.
they've got a dragon and a metal armed dude and Ral Zarek to deal with first. But anyway, yes. And so for all of those reasons, that is
Sorry
why
to ramble.
that is why the hand that moves is our number 2 best story of 2017. And the moment you've all been waiting for. Can you guess? If you're a long-time fan of JaAR, you may remember us calling this out at the time.
I'm sure if you're a fan of the channel that you know what this story is going to be. And if you're not a fan of the channel, but you've read all the stories, you still probably know which one this is going to be.
Although, to be fair, you might not remember that this story was from 2017 because it was the second story released in 2017.
Yeah.
I think it was on like literally January 4th. Like I think the first one was January 2nd, the second was January 4th. I could be wrong on the exact dates, but still, we go back to Aether Revolt, the second story of Aether Revolt, the second story of the year, and we have Burn by Chris Latois is our number one story, magic story of 2017. This story, I could talk about this story all over again. I could spend another hour. Hopefully I didn't. Check the time below. But I mean, seriously, it was amazing. I have said for the longest time, I said it in our top 10 of 2016, I'm saying it now, Chris Latois made such an impact on me. He did such amazing work as a writer, as a storyteller. He's written two of my favorite stories in the history of magic stories, if not my two favorites. This one, Burn, to get into more specifics, this story will probably most be remembered as the Baral versus Chandra story. The fight between Baral and Chandra, with a little bit of help from Nissa, a little bit of help from Mrs. Pashiri, but there was so much more to this story. This story, and it's so funny because this story was another long one. And so I wrote here, Renewal, that we talked about earlier, fixed the issues that we had with The Promised End. This story fixed the problems that we had with Saint Traft and the Flight of Nightmares from Eldritch Moon. That story was super long. It was leading up to the fight with the Flight of Nightmares, and then Thalia and Sigarda just killed Brazella very quickly. And it was like, what have we been sitting here for? Why did we spend so much time reading about them traveling
what
through
was the build-up even for?
Yes. And it was almost infuriating because of how long it took. This story took a damn long time, and every second was worth it.
Yeah.
And it started with Dovin Baan and Tezzeret.
Yeah.
Right? And then to a degree Baral, but you get to see Dovin kind of pushing Tezzeret's buttons.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
That's great.
Yes, because you get to see Dovin like being himself, and you get to kind of learn more about him, and you see his dry humor, and you realize that he's not intimidated by Tezzeret. Everybody else is, because Tezzeret is a tyrant of a human being.
Right.
And so he is, Baan is one of the few who's like, I'm not, there. I think at one point he even says, there are multiple scenarios that I could foresee where I could take you down right here and now. And Tezzeret's just like, well, whatever, just get it done. And just like kind of brushes him off because Dovin Baan was awesome.
Right.
But you get to see that sarcasm, right? That wit. And that's just the start of the story. Then you go to the Aether Hub, and the Aether Hub gets taken, and the Aether Hub, well, that was in Revolution Begins, but the Aether Hub has been taken, and now Dovin Baan is saying, well, here's how we get it back. This is what we do. It's super simple, right? And he says, we just fly overhead, because I know that Gideon Jura, is their leader, and he's not used to aerial battles. He's a ground trooper. And so Dovin Baan calls him out and kind of picks apart everyone's weaknesses in the Gatewatch.
Well, and that kind of goes back to what we said before about a good adversary. Someone who is just evil is not as good an adversary as someone who is wise and skilled and tactical.
Right.
So Dovin Baan is either someone who's going to be great as an adversary, or someone who's going to be great as he switches sides to the good, to the good side. So I think that will be an interesting story regardless of which way it goes.
Yes.
Whereas Tezzeret, you know, as an enemy is not as interesting.
Yes.
And you don't feel like he's going to come to the good side, you know, because he's just evil. And I mean, we learned on Kaladesh that he like kind of knows what he's doing when it comes to machinery and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But they didn't really get into that. They didn't really let us see the skills and the wisdom that he has.
Right. And so then, I mean, but even talking still about Dovin Bond, it's comparable. You talk again, or I should say, talking about a good adversary. Then you go to Baral. Holy crap, Baral was great in this story.
Yes.
Baral
personality
yes.
as well, which I did not expect.
No.
From a character like Baral, or what I assumed a character like Baral would be like.
Yeah.
I did not assume that he would be funny.
Yes.
And that he would be...
He did such a good job of baiting Chandra.
Yeah.
And preying on the fact that at heart she really is a child.
Yeah.
Right? A child.
An impulsive child.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the word impulsive. Thank you. An impulsive child who just acts on instinct. Right. Just, this is how I feel, this is what I'm doing. Right then and there. And guess what? When you come across someone who is tactical like Baral, you're going to have a big problem. It's not an Eldrazi. You can't just shoot fire at it until it explodes.
Right.
Baral was able to just cut that away and really brought Chandra, I think, closer to her death than Bolas did. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, sure.
Well, because Bolas is an enemy to everyone. Chandra is Baral's adversary.
Yeah.
So he is very calculated in the things that he does to fight her because he knows her.
Well, he wants revenge.
Well, yes, but he knows what she's capable of.
Yes.
You know, even though it was years later and she had honed her abilities and, you know, just gained knowledge and skill, you know, he, for the most part, still knew what it was that he could do to push her buttons.
Yeah.
To fight her effectively.
Yeah.
You know, just like Dovin Bond knew what to do against all the members of the Gatewatch.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really why stories involving those people are stories that are better than, say, you know, the one with Liliana and Tezzeret.
Right.
Where it was like, okay, yeah.
They're throwing barbs kind of back and forth.
Right,
and...
it's like a name-calling situation.
Yeah.
Instead of an actual real debate or, you know, fight.
And don't forget, I mean, I'm going to quickly go through these because I wrote them down because they're important and they're things that I didn't have to go back and look over this story that much. I remember these things. Mm-hmm. You have 2 Gearhulks get destroyed in this story. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Liliana and Gideon.
Right.
2 Gearhulks go down. Mrs. Pashiri almost dies in
Right.
trying to save Chandra. Chandra almost dies, partially by her own making, but it was because of the desperation I mean, Nissa was helping her fight Baral, mm-hmm. and even she was having issues.
Right.
Baral meets up with Dovin Bond at one point and is like running away, and then he comes back and it becomes this big fight. And then even earlier, right before the fight even happens, this was the story where Chandra and Gideon's relationship begins to blossom.
Right.
You get to see that, and then even in a story that was so clearly focused on Chandra and Baral, right? I mean, you had Dovin Bond, etc. in the beginning. In a story that was so focused on Chandra and Baral, you had that moment, though, of Chandra being baited by Baral, running after him, and Gideon being ready to go after her and help her because he knew that she was going to have trouble, but then immediately being called back because the revolutionaries are saying, you know, Gideon, Commander, sir,
Right. We need your help.
They're trying to take back the Ether Hub, and Gideon's like looking back and forth and trying to figure out because it's
like,
right.
What means more to me?
And it's right
Saving
after
all of these people's lives, or being there to help Chandra.
And the story team did a good job, or Chris Latois in this story did a good job of showing they had just had that moment together.
Right.
of the two of them, and Gideon kind of saying how much she meant to him.
In real life, that's always what happens too. It's always like right after.
Yeah. And then you have to make that tough choice.
Right.
And of course, Gideon made the correct choice. He basically realized that all of these revolutionaries or all these rebels were going to have issues, and it was just Chandra. Now, he also basically looked at Nissa and was like, you keep her safe.
Right.
And that's why Nissa went to help. But like I said, that did not mean, Chandra and Nissa together took down 2 Eldrazi Titans, and Baral gave them a huge issue.
Again, like I said, fighting a mindless, random enemy who doesn't know you from Adam doesn't do much,
But fighting someone who knows your
fighting
weaknesses,
exactly.
someone who is tactical, it was a phenomenal story. I would, if I had the time in my life to do it, I would go back and read that story often. God bless you.
Sorry.
I think that's a fine way to close it out. But
Glad you approve.
sure. No, seriously though, the story was amazing. I could go on for hours. I think I'm done.
And I think that I think The Hand That Moves is story number 2, and this story is story number 1. And the reason why, story number 2 I could talk about all day, all week, all month, all year. Story number 1, you don't really need to do that.
No, it speaks for
You can just
itself.
let it speak for itself.
Yes.
There's a lot of pick apart analysis that can go into The Hand That Moves. But Burn,
I said
it just is what it is.
I said it at the start of our review of Burn, or at some point during our review of Burn. I was scared because the story team, Chris Latois and the rest of the team, had set the bar very high. Well, here we are. Nobody crossed that bar. I will say The Hand That Moves was not too
Very
far
close.
off, but in our opinion, of course, because that is all that this list is, in our opinion, nothing passed it. Genuinely and honestly, do you agree with our list? Do you think that Burn was anywhere near the top? Do you think it deserved to be number 1, number 2, number 10, number 50? Let us know. Do you think that The Hand That Moves was better? Do you think that there were other things on this list that should have been higher, that should have been lower? Give us your opinions.
You cared more about the Yahenni story.
Yes, pander. Please pander to Amy in the comments. That's just what I need. No, but honestly, thank you guys.
Hey, I got Yahenni, and then Nissa, and then Burn, so I'm good.
Nissa was part of that as well. I think Jace was the only one who didn't play a large part in that story in general, out of all of the Gatewatch.
Thank God, because it was a wonderful story.
Wow.
He would have ruined it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on our top 10 list. Hopefully you watched the whole thing. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking it out with us.
Yeah.
Please let us know your thoughts
Glad
and opinions.
you made it.
Yes. Glad we made it. Welcome to 2018.
Not without a sneezing fit.
Yeah, whatever. That's fine. That'll happen. Next week we will be back with the Rivals of Ixalan stories. There are only 5 of them, guys. Only 5.
Yikes.
I am reserving my opinion because I think there's a lot that they could uncover. We've got a lot of characters to talk about, a lot of stuff that could come up. There are some things that are about to happen that I don't think at my cursory look I'm a big fan of, but I reserve, yes. But I'm reserving judgment until I have finished reading the stories.
Okay, good.
And if you want to see our opinions of those stories, you can click the subscribe button. It'll be coming up there. You can find out when all of our videos come out. We have these story reviews every Thursday. We did a JaAR, 52 of them, 51 of them in 2017. 2016 was 2 years ago. We did
Good job.
we did 51 of them in 2017, and we're not planning on stopping. We are gonna go strong, and we're gonna reach episode 100 soon. That's crazy.
That's gonna be weird.
Yeah, so very weird. Go back and look at episode 1. Look at how young we look.
Oh God.
Anyway, Amy's hair has changed a million times. I've had my beard the whole time, because why wouldn't I? But the lengths were different. we will be back next week, as I said, for Rivals of Ixalan. Thank you guys so much for joining us, for watching. This has been JaAR on Geek for All. Thank you for... I was going to get there. I wasn't going to forget.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for all of 2017.
Yes.
As we
you so
showed
much.
off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
She didn't have any faith in me.
Thank
See that?
you. I'm
faith.
sorry.
We talked about this today.
Hey, their faith was for nothing. They all died. Well, not all of them.
Not all of them. We talked about that too. Anyway, this has been JaAR on Geek for All, like I said. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.